That's why I don't go outside. That's why I don't go outside. Pale teeth and white smiles, they don't care and I don't mind. Pale bricks and wide smiles, that's why I don't go outside. I've got it.
Hello and welcome to the London International Animation Festival series, The Great British Takeoffs, talks with some of the UK and world's best animation studios. We're very pleased to have BlinkInk here, who are a world-class London-based studio creating short-form video content with their partners in the advertising, music, gaming, fashion and broadcasting industries. Hi folks, how are you doing?
Hello.
Good.
Oh.
Very good, thank you.
Great, so would you like to introduce yourself, maybe starting with the threesome, Bart?
Yes, so I'm Bart Yates. I'm the founder and executive producer of BlinkInk.
I'm James Studholme, and I am the original founder of Blink, which has grown many tentacles, one of which is BlinkInk.
Hello, my name's Courtney Arumagam. I'm head of development and executive producer on the long form side of things,
Which is called BlinkIndustries.
Hello, I'm Nina Gantz and I'm an animation director from the Netherlands. And I ended up working in the UK after I graduated from the National Film and Television School. And then, I started to work at BlinkInk. I don't know, Bart, when our first meeting was, when I started.
You graduated in 2016, was it?
15.
15, so yeah, probably around 2016.
Yeah, so quite a while now. So, and I've been working on some commercial projects with BlinkInk and also on a short animated film with BlinkIndustries.
And a music video that you still haven't finished.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me on that.
That's not why she's in quarantine, everybody. So don't worry about that.
Well, I live in Brighton. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. And let's start off with the beginning. And this may be sort of very much a Bart and James question. I don't know. So tell us about the genesis of BlinkInk. How did it start? I think it's 2005. Was it around then?
So BlinkInk started in 2005, but maybe James can talk about the genesis of Blink.
Yeah, you got to go back to 1985, where Blink started. Me and a guy called Bob Laurie, very tiny Australian irascible animation genius and wizard. And he was originally an illustrator who'd sort of stumbled into animation. And the first 5 years of Blink as a company was as an old style, in a way, paint and trace, the physical craft of animation, where you had it was all done on cells or paper, people scurrying around Soho with big boxes of cells, doing line tests, where the sounds were laid up on big loops when you went and did sessions and special effects. I mean, it was a very, very physical craft. And that went until the very early 90s, when essentially that type of animation industry was essentially wiped out by the coming of the mill and frame store and people like that, who were offering a rather primitive version of sort of motion graphics and animation, but advertising loves a new thing. So it migrated to that. And I suppose up to that point, animation was seen as a very practical problem-solving medium in advertising. It was like if you had a script that you physically couldn't do in live action, you did it in animation. And very often that was a very pragmatic solution. And so animation wasn't there were some really great illustrators, with people like Oscar Grillo, who was sensational, lots of really good if you like, illustrative animators around at that time, but it wasn't particularly innovative. And so really, Blink had it was evolve or die, and we actually evolved into these kind of hybrid live action and animation solutions. We did, for example, Snap, Crackle, and Pop for Rice Krispies as prosthetic characters, but we did all the POW and Zap stuff as animation, and the rest of it was live action. So we were synthesizing. So this is the DNA of what is now BlinkInk and what is now BlinkIndustries, largely formed in lots of ways in the 20 years up to the founding of Ink. And progressively, we became more and more of a live action company. And then around the turn of the millennium, the directors that I thought were the most interesting and was attracted to seemed to have animation sensibilities, and they were coalescing in the company. And it became obvious that because we'd migrated so far towards being a live action production company that people didn't think about us like that anymore. And so the genesis of BlinkInk was in order to plant a flag that said, we are doing animation, we have animation directors, this is what we're doing, and it's new and interesting. And the directors were fundamentally different to the directors from before, because they would people who were coming out of art animation schools in France or from Sweden or whatever, and they viewed animation as an artistic medium, not a pragmatic or practical medium. They viewed it as a way of making really, really interesting, innovative visual statements. So the DNA was set, the love of animation, and it was, through the company like writing through a stick of rock, but it came back as something else. And that's where Bart led that. And I guess we started with a group of about 6 or 7 directors.
Yep. In 2005, I'd joined Blink in about 2002 and was sort of training up as a live action producer. And then, as James says, we were sort of coalescing a group of really interesting animation-y directors. And then, so we built BlinkInk around them. And there was also, I think, CG by this stage had very much become the norm. And, you needed big teams and big studios and lots of computers to do CG, especially back in those days. And so probably around that time, some of those directors, people like Ben Hibben or Plex, were directors or Simon and John as well, they were doing, and Lynn Fox, I guess, as well.
Well, there were definitely directors who were across both sides, but like the sensibility was powerful. And so even a director like Dougal Wilson started much more in the animation space. I mean, his breakthrough commercials were some cutout paper animation for Orange, Bear Trap, and these various things, which were for Mother, the ads, and they were terrific. And they'd come from a video that he'd done for a band called Clonhertz, I think, which was a pop-up book that had coming to life. And animation was an incredibly strong element in his work. And we had directors like Mark Denton, who, although they weren't animation, they had an animation sensibility. So it never went away, but it came back as something else. And then the roster evolved.
Yeah, I think it was probably a tipping point at that time as well, where people were able to make films using computer animation, but able to make things which could be a standalone film on their own. So using programs like 3ds Max, if I remember back in the days. Ben Hibben was showing us amazing films that he made in Flash. He was he was doing web design and then was actually at night using Flash to do these like incredibly graphical sort of cinematic short films, which we saw and we were like, oh, this is amazing. And then so I guess that was the sort of using computers, but in a bit more of a sort of bootstrap creative style at that moment in time.
And there was I don't know whether it was quite as far back as that, but Bug, which the music video as an industry had sort of gone underground. All the TV outlets, the chart show, Top of the Pop, they're all gone. So it had become essentially an online medium, and Bug championed that, picked up on that. We used to find interesting directors coming out of that, and that was the point about the new technology. It completely democratized animation, particularly, you know, because if you're a live action director, to persuade 15 of your mates to turn up on a Saturday and do your bidding and feed them and edit it, etc., was quite a task. Whereas if you were in your bedroom working on a computer fueled only by Coca-Cola and crisps, you could do that. And so I think that spawned a new generation of directors who were able to develop completely under their own aegis, and as a result had a very idiosyncratic and individual vision.
So you know, you painted a picture there of how, you know, BlinkInk evolved, you know, as you know, as demand evolved. Do you have a sort of a really strict or really rigorous business plan at that time, or did it just happen? I'm always keen to know how these things, you know, come into being. Are they planned and as a step-by-step business plan, or is it just, you know, you're waiting by the phone to see what happens next?
Well, I don't think running a commercials production company, the business plan's ever been particularly useful, because it's so idiosyncratic in terms of you can't plan anything. You'll have a very busy August one year and you'll have no work for 3 months in July, August, September the next year, and you don't know why. The idea at that time was to find the most exciting talent I possibly could, and the general thought behind that is hiring people, again, not very forensic. Basically, if you saw a director and you were so curious to see what they were going to do next that you had to be part of it, then you tried to sign them. That was it, really. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm looking for a comedy director. You're looking for people who have got powerful, interesting vision that you're incredibly excited to be part of going on that journey. And for whatever reason, that worked really well for us for 20 years. And we had, for 20 consecutive years, we had a director in the Saatchi and Saatchi Young Directors Showcase. So our thing was talent development. You know, that's again a core DNA. We are, you know, we're Barcelona, not Manchester United.
Great, thanks. Well, let's take you up to the present now, and you know, we want to look at sort of BlinkInk through 4 different lenses: technology, audience, business, and people. But let's start off with technology. You know, you've mentioned there before about 3ds Max back in the day, etc. But could you paint us a picture of what are the main differences between how you work now with technology compared with then? And you know, later on we'll talk no doubt a bit about the future, but give us that idea of, you know, how the technology has changed.
Well, so I think probably in terms of how we evolved as an animation company, having that DNA of a live action company, which is much more about keeping sort of quite small and then crewing up on the projects rather than building a pipeline that delivers a certain kind of animation. I think that's probably enabled us to sort of grow with a much more diverse array of work as an output rather than a lot of animation studios, because we would basically approach every project and you know, in however the director wanted, or however we and the director wanted to approach the project, and then so that, you know, by probably the 2010s had started to incorporate a lot of old school craft, stop motion, 2D animation, you know, doing these things that became a hybrid of sort of innovative technology and storytelling, but mixing that up with kind of classic animation craft. And so that sort of became our thing in a world where probably our competitors at the time, like PsyOp and Nexus and Passion, were just sort of like getting bigger and bigger pipelines and doing bigger and bigger CG jobs, and the world was, you know, getting more and more into big CG. We were just sort of working with a lot of people who were, coming out, either people who'd been working back in the 80s and 90s, and then we were sort of bringing some of that old school craft back into, you know, I guess reinvigorating a lot of that old school craft with new perspectives of really young, interesting directors. And that sort of became our thing. So in terms of the technology that we've used, I mean, we use pretty much everything. And then we outsource, we've always had very strong outsource relationships, working with post houses, working with animation studios across 2D or stop motion or, you know, CGI or whatever. So I would say we've pretty much kept abreast of working with all kinds of different technology, just depending on what's the right tools for the job. And I think probably the thing that people don't appreciate so much is that all of the technological advancements, which are really, really obvious when you look at visual effects or you look at CGI and how that's evolved in the last 20 years, all of that innovation has impacted on stop motion, it's impacted on 2D animation, and it's made all of those things way more snazzy, and you're able to, and much faster to produce as well. So,
but when it tips over, doesn't it? I mean, I remember we long time back, we made a great ad for John Lewis Christmas, made by Elliot Deere. And the massive discussion in making that was how to be able to leave all of the sort of weft of human imperfection in it, even though we were using at that time a mixture of new technology and old technology. But there was and this often happens in advertising, is there is a quest to over-perfect. And in over-perfecting, you lose the emotion. And it was absolutely critical that that had the emotion that John Lewis was known for and that the story required. So yeah, so that's been a big thing for us, is trying to work out how to deploy technology without the work feeling too shiny and dry and clean. And I think a lot of movies and things that come out now, see sort of CG that is masquerading as stop frame, feels like it's sort of neither. And I think we want to steer clear of that.
Great, thank you. Well, let's move on to audience then, because, you know, there's you could say there's been a fragmentation of audience. You know, there's so many more sort of places for audience to see animation. How has the audience changed for you? Are you having to think a lot more about the different kinds of audiences that you're making stuff for, or are you just always working for the client and whatever the client says goes?
you want to talk about audience?
Sure. I mean, well, in terms of where they're not lead up to how I fit into this, but on the industry side, which works as a result of the foundations of what Ink put together, we now have a very successful, thriving development department, who are here exactly to service, you know, the needs of an audience. So it's marrying together commercially what makes sense. It's, you know, that obviously comes from audience demand with what we're capable of here from a sort of technology point of view. And again, still working with new talent, be that, you know, behind or in front of camera or screen. But the audience is really, you know, we'd be remiss to not think about who's going to watch this and where will it end up. So it's the great idea and where it will end up are the first two things that we start with, and then we work sort of towards the middle to make it actually happen. So we have a first look deal with BBC Studios that was announced earlier this year for their kids and family department, which obviously represents a big shift in terms of what the history of the company is. That's completely story-led, completely character-led, and it is looking specifically at a young audience. So anything from preschool up to the family area. And that is a great opportunity for us to get our directors who've, you know, cut their teeth on commercial projects, or just directors and talent artists that we really love, and then bringing them into the fold to think about ideas that will be successful. So we want things that have got a sort of, we say, that feel like a Blink project, which is a really difficult thing to describe. We know what it's not, I guess, more so than we know what it is. We're in Holloway, so excuse the sirens. But yes, we've got, that's it. You know, the audience are at the heart of everything we do. And, you know, it's really important for us to come back to who is going to watch this? Who is this for? It's not, we're not making something for ourselves. In order for something to be successful, yes, we want to be proud of it, but we want people to watch it. And an increasingly saturated marketplace, that's not as easy to crack. So it's something that we're very conscious of. And as I said, it does inform all of our decisions.
Is it worth us just clarifying a little bit, BlinkInk, the distinction between BlinkInk and BlinkIndustries?
Please do.
So when you ask about a business plan, probably back in 2005, my business plan was make commercials and then an arrow going to make movies. Hadn't really figured out the bit in between. And then when James Breton, who was the first person who joined me in BlinkInk in about 2007, he shared a similar vision for trying to, how do we, we love making commercials and music videos, and this is what we do, and it's really exciting. How do we grow into making films as well? Because Netflix hadn't been invented at that point. And then as we started, steadily chipping away at that together. And then I guess when Netflix came along, it became make commercials, make television, and then make films. So, all of our attention sort of switched into this new expanding world of high quality TV. And then, so probably about 2012, I'd say, 2012, we made our first TV commission for Cartoon Network, which was some episodes of a puppet show directed by Johnny and Will called The Grumpy King, which we made about 6 episodes of that, I think. And that got BAFTA nominated for a kids BAFTA, which was really exciting. And then we chipping away, and then we eventually got our first proper series commissioned by Netflix in 2019, and that went into production in 2020. Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared is another show that we've sort of built up over the years as a web series, and then got that commissioned as a Channel 4 series in 2021.
What BAFTA?
That won a BAFTA. That actually won the BAFTA. And then we are currently in production on our next major series, which is called The Sunny Ridge 3, which is again with some BlinkInk directors, Stevie G and Essie May, who we first met as illustrators, developed them into music video directors, then into commercial directors, and now they're making a 2-season show for Disney Plus, which is an idea that they developed in-house, and we're producing that in our other studio up the road. And then, so I guess that sort of represents, that's the sort of trajectory we aim for, is discovering talent in the kind of wilds of music video and short film making, developing up through commercials into long form, and then eventually making shows ideally. And we still haven't made a film yet, but we're working on that. And so these days, probably the split in terms of our turnover, BlinkInk and BlinkIndustries is probably about half and half on a normal year. So.
I just got another question about audiences. Do you detect certain trends with audiences? There's a certain demand for something one month, and then a certain demand for another kind of look a bit later on. Do you detect that, and how far do you sort of react to that, or do you just sort of ignore it for the purity of your art? How does it go?
I think on that rhythm that you're just talking about there, I think it's impossible. I think that the first thing to say is that in advertising, being concerned for our audience is slightly unhelpful. It's actually better to detach ourselves from all of that background noise and static that goes on, and try and make the film that the client needs and that's original, rather than the film that the client thinks he wants. That sounds a bit controversial, but you're basically trying to make something brilliant and astonishing, and it's thinking about the audience is not one of the primary things. Whereas getting things commissioned in TV is, I can speak to this, but getting things commissioned in TV, the rhythm of it is so much longer, isn't it?
Definitely. I think we don't operate in a vacuum. Obviously, we have to be conscious of what audiences are into and where there are trends, but the nature of development is such a sort of long-winded, multi-layered thing that what's working now isn't necessarily what we will have made in 2 years' time. So I think it's not dissimilar to what James said, in the sense of we just want to make good things, without sounding very simplistic about it. And then hopefully it will be the thing that audiences want to watch. We've got, real attention to detail when it comes to quality, and looking for voices and stories that haven't been told, so that actually we can create a trend, so that it will be a thing that actually hasn't been done and that is interesting and that stands up, as I said, in a marketplace which is incredibly busy. There's a lot of noise, and you need to stand out amongst those other options.
I think in terms of advertising audiences, the audience is just so fragmented these days. People are just watching so much different stuff in so many different places, and then trying to think about the context of what kind of commercials people are seeing in all of those different places is very difficult. And so a lot of the time a lot of advertising still just, it's not that dissimilar to when there was just 3 TV stations where you just make one thing and then you put it out across all the channels and hope people like it. It's still pretty much how most adverts get made from what I can tell. And also the main audience, I think that most people who work in advertising think about is the audience of other people who work in advertising.
Through that.
and the awards juries will be maybe given some kind of crowning achievement for their commercial. Sorry, I've been doing
well, okay, that's great and fascinating. Let's move on to the bread and butter bit, which is the business bit. So how is today's business environment and how has it changed over the years for you?
I mean, it's definitely. Nina, what's your perspective on as a jobbing director going from sort of project to project, pitching, trying to kind of, you never really know where your next year of income is going to come from. How have you found it in the last 8 years that we've been working together?
Yeah, well, it's I guess sometimes you like the first 2 years I worked for Blink, I think I pitched on 4 things and I didn't get any of them. So that was 2 years of very little work, and luckily I always had something cooking in the background, and I think that's really important also creatively to keep going, also financially, of course, and I think it kind of works together if you keep working on a creative project of your own while also doing commercials. I think it's really can help each other. So that's how I see it. So I basically have always something cooking, and then sometimes when Bart calls me up, I think, okay, now my life is gonna change for the next half year because I'm gonna get a job or not, but usually, I know that there's a potential job, and then that is the total focus. I completely put the other thing on the sideline and I completely go for it because I can't really do 2 big projects at once.
And I think that's probably quite indicative of our model as a company, that thing of we're constantly investing in music videos and short films and development projects. And so you're trying to kind of invest in your own stuff whilst at the same time getting paid to as commissions, making work for other people and sort of trying to find that balance. Definitely the thing that probably attracts the most work for individual directors tends to be the more personal work, the short films, the music videos, the kind of the passion projects. So and then if you stop pursuing those kind of projects because you're so busy making commercials, it becomes sort of diminishing returns creatively and then commercially. So it is that kind of constant cycle of reinvestment is very important. How's the business environment? Super tough at the moment, across the board. It's just, entertainment's really tough, gaming's really tough, advertising's really tough. We're keeping busy, and I think we feel very fortunate that we're kind of keeping busy at the moment because it's obviously not, it's pretty quiet out there for a lot of people.
Thank you for that, and this may be sort of another one for Nina. I don't know, but moving on to sort of people and talent. How has your talent diversified over the years? What I'm keen to know how sort of the artists, the directors get to keep up to date with all the possible ways they can make work. So and how do you keep those relationships going with artists as well? So people like Nina come back to you again and again.
Well, it's also a question for you, for the others to answer, but from what I've seen, well, in the many years I've now worked at BlinkInk, so I think the interesting thing is that it's I've seen different directors, but all of them are really focused on craft and can also really work over the whole project. So they're really multifaceted, and I think it's fun when I go into Blink and I see those directors. We're all cut from the same cloth, but like I feel like we are all real makers, and we love the whole process. And I think that's something that stayed the same, and that's something that's really that binds us.
Bart, I'm sure has got more to say, but I've always thought that what discriminated us from other animation companies was that we're not about illustration styles. We're not about people who've got a thing that they do. That over the years we've had the odd person like that, and the trouble is when their thing is used up, it's done. Whereas what we are interested in is directors, and directors come at the problem, that the challenge they are being posed with, what is the right solution to this technologically, creatively, stylistically, technically. So, and I think that's the great thing that sort of unifies. I mean, Nina's a perfect example of this, a genius director who looks at the challenge in a bespoke way to that challenge. And I think a lot of the other animation, some of our competitors, is that old adage that if what you have is a nail, you see the world as a hammer, and if you have a big old CG pipeline, that's kind of how you see everything that comes in, and we're the other end of the street from that. And I think that informs, to be honest, that informs our talent development, who we're interested in, and that is a pretty broad spectrum, right? But it's about that. They're directors. What do you think?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, agree. And I guess as and as an executive producer, where our role is, we're talent management essentially, and that's the thing people don't really talk about that much in the production company models. They talk about production, but it's talent management first and foremost. It's attracting and managing and nurturing and supporting that talent through their careers, and then so that's always about, and most really talented people, they want the next project to be different, they want to learn, they want to grow, they want to keep evolving, and so finding a way to kind of facilitate that is really, really important. And often it's a lot of working with the talent to improve their own professional skills in certain areas. Some people, maybe even Nina, wasn't particularly good at pitching when she first came with us, as her 4-job losing streak through. But now, Nina, you're really good at pitching. There's a lot of which is, and that goes across the board in terms of working with actors, live, moving from combining live action with animation with live action, or moving into different animation techniques and kind of processes, or getting into long form storytelling and character development and that kind of thing. These are all skills that you have to kind of work quite hard on developing.
And it means that we have to keep ourselves attractive. If we're going to attract the best talent, there are other places that we can lose people to, and we need to make ourselves seem like the best possible option, because we aren't anything without our talent. So we can have the ideas, but if we haven't got the right people to execute them, and based on our reputation, people know that they can trust us to be given a brief and come up with something that looks like nothing else. But that's completely dependent on the right talent being here.
So how do you sort of network? How do you find, you have your directors, but how do you find new talent? How does it work? Where do you look?
We do a lot of outreach, don't we?
Yeah, a lot of outreach.
There is a lot of outreach that we do as a company, which is great, because again, it's a nice thing to do. It's a very good way of, whether it's finding talent, inspiring talent. We run an in-house training scheme with that anybody who's here is welcome to join, and it's just something that's completely you don't have to go to it, but it's a place where you can go and you can learn how to pitch, you can learn how to put a treatment together, you can learn about various roles within our industry or the company. But I think there is, you have to keep going. If you become complacent and you think, oh, we know everybody, that's nonsense, because it's it's an ever-moving target. So it's something that I think we're all really good at, making sure we put our money where our mouth is, in terms of making sure that we're constantly, whether it's at events and festivals and so on, that we have a presence that's meaningful.
But at the other end of that spectrum, which is looking out, very often, there's an old adage that good people know good people. that very often the talent is kind of under our nose in the company. You know, it's somebody who's a director here, and it's their mate that they brought in to do some work on some project, and then they show you their little personal film, and you go, I mean, this is amazing. And that has happened frequently.
Yep. Yeah. Or we'll tend to have a run with a particular school, for example, like the National Film and Television School. I think we met Simon Cartwright and Nina from your year, and then over the next kind of few years, there was, you know, maybe a graduate from each sort of subsequent year. And then so then we support festivals, or, you know, those kind of things. You know, you've got to put the time sort of going out there and kind of meeting people and that sort of thing, and people come back. We support the BFI Future Film Festival. So we support the animation prize there, and we were giving the animation prize a few years ago, and we met a director called Will Whiteman, who was being awarded the Best Director prize, and then he ended up joining us shortly thereafter. And Joseph Byrne, who's my other EP, is obsessively on Instagram, and then I've always been more kind of Vimeo and YouTube. But then it's you know, you're just seeing stuff all the time, and whenever you see anything that you like from somebody out there, it's like you just send them a message, go, hey, how you going? Have a, you know, just strike a conversation, see what they're up to wherever they are in the world, and just stuff happens quite organically. And also sometimes with talent, it's a bit like with songs. You don't necessarily see it and go, bang, that's it, I love this. But you might see the film somewhere and go, that's quite interesting. Then you forget about it. Then someone else mentions it a couple of weeks later. You go, oh, I've seen that thing. I quite like that. And then you forget about it again. And then another few months later, you see it again. You go, I love this. This is amazing. Who is this? And then you get in touch, and it happens. But we've always been like growing from a bag of seeds kind of mentality with talent, mostly, I would say.
Great, thanks. Well, let's move on to sort of looking towards the future in that case. And you know, can you sum up at the moment what the creative climate is like in terms of your work and the work of your directors? You know, are we in a golden age, or are we in a sort of a rut? How do you sort of think about the kind of creative work that's being created at the moment?
What do you feel about that, Nina, looking from your vantage point? Do you think things are getting better or worse?
Sorry, I don't really think about it like that, really. I just I just focus on what I want to do and what I think is right. So it's for me it's going very well. Like I don't know, but I really don't know about the climate, or like I think I get a lot of opportunities to work with really great people and to work on really nice projects. And so for me, but I don't know how you guys see that.
I guess from the sort of TV and film side of things, creatively, we're in a bit of a catch-22, because we need to offer something different in order to be compelling, and again, to stand up against not even our competitors, against ourselves. You know, we've got a range of things in one area, and it's like, well, what's this preschool show got over this preschool show? And that's just us. And then you're dealing with a very risk-averse environment. So, you know, there have been significant losses, you know, across the industry that have, you know, impacted all of us, you know, in some way. So it's trying to do that incredibly new, inventive, clever thing in a space where people are quite frightened about making an investment that doesn't pay off. So I guess to a point, I do a bit of what Nina said, I think, where you just have to kind of block out the noise a bit. Obviously being conscious of what's going on, but not letting that dictate, you know, the quality of the vision that you've got. And, you know, if you always, I'm going to use another adage, but, you know, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. So I think there is that we are kind of, I guess, sort of consciously blocking the noise out a bit so that we don't make decisions that feel risk averse, because that's not our job to be risk averse. We're still here doing what we do. And it is peaks and troughs, and, you know, we'd be naive and, you know, blind to not see that there are problems in the industry at the moment, but we remain confident that there's always an audience. We just have to be there with the thing that they want to see when they're ready to see it.
Yeah, I think we're in a particular moment where, in long form anyway, where, so for example, when at Annecy, Sunny Ridge 3 for Disney was announced, it was literally the only show on their entire slate that was original IP.
Yeah.
Everything else was a prequel, a sequel, a reimagination, essentially a remake. So you know that we're currently in a world that's quite hostile to genuinely new things. I think these things are trends. I have to say, I think we should stick to our knitting and do. I mean, that's always been our idea. You know, at different times we've described ourselves as a weirdo factory. You know, coming up with things that are new and fresh and trying to then frame them in a way that fits. You know, to your point earlier about audience, providing a rationale for why that would be great for a particular audience.
Yeah.
But it is a slight problem, this issue of the obsession with existing IP currently.
And you know these trends happen over the decades, and we're definitely in this moment where people talk about Marvel fatigue and this just a glut of things that you've already seen before, but actually the sectors that are doing really well is indie film, indie video games. And that, I guess, that independent spirit of doing things which don't cost a ridiculous amount of money and are, are taking a risk and being unpredictable, then that's the kind of thing that everybody gets excited about at times like these.
Yeah.
And which is good for us because we've definitely got, I would say, an indie sensibility overall.
Right. Okay. Well, here's the crystal ball section now. So, do you know what's coming next for BlinkInk? Do you have a sort of a 5-year plan or even a sort of a 5-month plan? Do you have a sense of where BlinkInk is going, or is it always a surprise what's happening? So next year's slate will be a surprise to you guys.
I can tell you on the long form side that there will be some very exciting announcements, which we can't talk about now.
Yep.
And yeah, with the BBC Studios deal, we have got lots and lots of exciting things. So it's a first look deal. So anything that we have in the kids and family space, we show to BBC Studios from a distribution point of view. So that really gives us some options in terms of being able to look in places where we otherwise wouldn't have been able to with their support. So that's something new for the company, definitely, being able to sort of really establish ourselves in a meaningful way for that particular audience. But yeah, I think that the company's change is obviously, as James and Bart have outlined. So we, I think that it's being, I guess, future-proofing ourselves is doing what we do, but doing it in different ways. So we do have a games division now. We have got a features department. There's my whole department downstairs. So that is a way of us saying, okay, well, how else can we do what we do, and how else can we tell our stories, and how else can we match up the incredible talent that comes through our doors with the ideas that they bring to us, and vice versa.
I would say in terms of trends within the commercials industry, America's been really great for us in the last couple of years. We've been spending more time over there and seeing more projects from over there, and that seems to be a bit more of a kind of vibrant market. For the kind of work that we do is quite specific, so I guess culturally it seems to chime with, especially on the east coast of America, we seem to see a lot of really nice opportunities from there at the moment. The UK is still solid, but definitely a bit slow, and the work that we are doing in the UK mostly tends to be with independent agencies rather than the big network agencies. Yeah, for whatever reason. And we're also growing in terms of our direct-to-client work, a lot of direct-to-brand work, especially with video game companies or sports brands or those kind of things, where there is where a lot of those kind of organizations now, they're hiring people internally who have production skills and project management skills and creative direction skills and art direction and that kind of thing. And then so there's people inside who we are very comfortable working with, rather than say a marketing director in need of a brand strategy. So we can be working directly, doing much more kind of creative and production focused work. And also we sort of seem to be seeing a bit of a trend where, as advertising is pushing into more storytelling, more, I guess, like branded content, but character and narrative driven branded content rather than non-scripted documentary style work. We're getting quite a few approaches in the animation space in that sense, where people are coming to us, and specifically because of our skills within BlinkIndustries of being able to write scripts and develop characters and tell longer stories and, you know, deliver these you know, quite contained sort of short film style advertising projects. So we've been doing quite a lot of those recently as well, which is exciting.
And co-productions is a big thing for us as well on the long form side. We've made meaningful relationships and we're continuing to work with those. And again, looking at the studios that we're partnering with, we're treating them the same way we would our directors or any other talent. It's who's the right person to help us see this particular, you know, property through. So, and that allows us to tap into other parts of the world, which brings up, you know, financial incentives. There are good tax credits and so on, but that's not the driving force there at all. It is who are the right people to help us get this thing over the line.
Nina, what about you? So how do you see your practice developing? You know, what's next, do you think? Do you detect any sort of what's going to happen in the near future with regard to your own practice?
So I keep on making, hopefully, commercials as well. And I think I'm getting more connections with certain companies, for instance, that I like to work with and that like to work with me. So I hope that I can do that, because all those commercials have really helped me, you know, learn how to work with a bigger crew and try out different techniques that I've never tried before and doing new things. And so I would like to keep that going. And then next to that, I'm developing actually 2 feature length films, which BlinkIndustries is involved with. So that's the future for me. So I said to myself I would not do another short film again, because the last one actually took 8 years. But you know, it's starting to fade away and it's going so well with it that I'm kind of, you know, still excited about doing something again. So but yeah, so I think that will be my focus, out developing longer form stories as well, and yeah, learning all about that.
Well, if I can stay with you, because I have a follow question, which this is, you know, whenever you have 2 animators or 2 people talking together, it usually comes up the subject of AI. So, you know, I wanted to ask all of you, but I'll start with Nina. Are you using generative AI, and what's your take on its effect on animation production in general?
So I don't use it. That's not per se because I've got something against it, or I do have something against it, but it's not the reason why I'm not using it. It's mostly that I love traditional animation. I love making things with my hands, and I love the texture and the craft and all the presence you get when you make something for real. And I just feel it's really hard to tell that to a computer. So I wouldn't know how to work with it. I for a long time I didn't even work in 3D, but now with actually doing a commercial for Lego, I did do a commercial with 3D, and that was actually quite nice to learn that skill. And I use it for, this is the puppet from my short film. You can see it here. And I also got to use it for these because I needed to make like 3D printed faces, something that I've never done before. You can see it here. It's really scary. These are like replacement faces. And the thing is that I think I want to tell stories, and I want to tell it in the best way possible. And whatever I need for that, I will probably use. I'm not sure how AI would come into play with that, but I can imagine that there could be ways that I could use that in the future. For me, I find it quite scary because I mean, whatever, I don't know much about it, so whatever I can see now, it's very soulless. But I think if you use it in the right way and you know, I think it could be interesting.
Yeah, Bart, James, and Courtney, there's a lot of sort of I guess you'd say, well, anxiety around AI. What's your take on using AI? Do you use it Do you know your directors are using it? Does it matter?
We're certainly not using it right now. I think to Nina's point, I think we just want to tell stories in the best ways possible. And if at some point AI is the right way of doing that, then, you know, we're not, again, I think that you have to see it, you have to understand it and not be frightened of it. You have to take a good look at it and see if it's the right thing for you. It really isn't right now. We are completely ideas and people centric, and AI can't replace that for us at the moment. So it's absolutely not something that we're using at the moment, but like I said, it would be silly to rule it out in the future, because we just don't know, you know, what the landscape will look like. But for now, it's just not something that's complementary to the way that we want to tell our stories.
And as an outcome from the writers' strike, all of our contracts that we sign with, you know, American networks is, you know, basically say that we can't use generative AI in our workflows. But then a lot of AI is just being very quietly updated into our workflows as well. If you're using a filter in Adobe Photoshop that's using AI, no one's really that bothered about that. It is, you know, it is more, I guess, the generative kind of creating original stuff. And then, you know, where's the IP coming from that it's being trained on, and, you know, those kinds of issues. But yeah, we don't tend to use it much in terms of even in treatment. Sometimes different directors have a bit more of a handle on it than others, but it tends not to be something that anyone gets particularly excited about, even in a treatment, because as Nina said, it just feels a little bit dead. You very quickly get to something that you go, wow, that looks cool. But then if you live with it for a few minutes, there's not much kind of to it. Where if somebody does a drawing, then the drawing's got charm and personality and something about it that everybody can fall in love with. It's hard to fall in love with an AI created image or piece of video. Yeah.
Yeah, it's dead behind your eyes.
And also, people want to work with people, you know. It's like you go, hey, I've got this new band, they're AI. You go, well, who am I going to go and see in concert? You know, it's your, you know, if you're, you know, and it's the same with directors, with artists, with musicians. Like, people love people and people's stories, and kind of getting into that.
And specifically for us, we've always been craft-based. You know, we've always been loving the analog. So anyway, I think we've got a little way to go. It doesn't feel like anybody's got hard and fast policies yet that are in any way thought through and complex and insightful. It feels like at the moment there's a blanket sort of like, whoa.
Also, no one's really worked out how to make money from AI yet.
Exactly.
If I save £350 on a concept artist because I'm using AI instead of paying somebody to do that work, the AI company doesn't make that £350. I just say that they just get my £20 a month subscription. So in terms of, so I think at the moment, everything's happening very, very quickly because there's a lot of investment and a lot of speculation going into AI. But until there's a business case for it, and an actual...
There's a security and a confidentiality problem there as well. I mean, I'm thinking about, you know, we've got a show in production. We have to vet people before they go into the building, because it's really important that we, you know, maintain an incredible level of secrecy around the shows that we're making. If we're taking, you know, things from some sort of robot on the internet, then how do we protect the idea for our, you know, for the person that we're servicing, you know, the brief with?
Yeah, I sort of asked that question because, you know, obviously I meet a lot of students, and students are very concerned about, you know, the future of AI and the practice that they're currently learning. And on that basis, I wanted to ask you sort of, you know, you mentioned the NFTS and a number of other schools that you sort of look to, if you like, for talent. But what kind of advice would you give somebody who's studying animation at the moment? Give us a quick sort of rundown of what pearls of wisdom you'd give to them to stop them from being depressed about AI and you know, writers' strikes and all that stuff.
Who wants to go first?
I think what advice did I give in a very depressive otherwise environment? I think being a consumer is really important. I think watching as much as you can possibly watch and having an opinion is really important, good and bad, just to have an understanding of the landscape. Like, you can't underestimate how useful that is to have opinions, and to have opinions that are based on what you would do differently, what you loved about that show, you know, however you see it. I think that's really definitely, and when we're interviewing people, it's really important that there is an opinion there that it isn't just what you've done in terms of your study, which obviously is incredibly important, but what's you about, you know, your opinion? What is it that you would bring to us? And ultimately, it's the opinion and the taste of the people that we're working with that attracts us to them.
Yeah, I mean, building on that, I would say focus on ideas, appropriately sized ideas for the size of project you're trying to make. Because a great idea, not particularly brilliantly executed, always defeats a brilliantly executed shit idea.
Yes.
Number one. Number two, I think, you know, develop your craft. I don't think craft is going to go anywhere anytime soon. And then the third thing is what discriminates you from everybody else. Don't try and make work that is reassuringly just like all sorts of other people's work. You're better off making 30 seconds of something eye-scorchingly original and unique to you than 10 minutes of sort of moderately well-produced blandness. I suppose those are my three things.
I think that's excellent advice.
Bart, what about you?
It's something, I mean, it does feed into these things. You know, a lot of the time when people are, you know, when they're studying and they're sort of trying to find their you know, networking, you know, finding their first connections in the professional world, is just really like keep your portfolio, keep your kind of presentation online as sort of brief and concise as possible. Just distill it down to your very best work at that moment in time, and don't keep a load of old stuff on your Instagram or on your website or on your show reel that shows that you can do something reasonably well that you might have done 4 years ago.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, don't be afraid to be pigeonholed as being very good at a specific thing at the early stage of your career, as it makes it much easier for bigger organizations to connect with you. And just always be thinking about your audience, who you're talking to, and how you're talking to them, because that just, you know, that just continues. And for, you know, right from the very start of trying to, you know, have a LinkedIn page and getting somebody to see your Instagram, all the way through to trying to make a show for Netflix or Disney or something like that. It's really thinking about what's the context of this, who's looking at it, and how do I want to connect with that person within the context of how they're seeing it. I think coming back to advertising, it's where so much advertising now, it's just, it has no context, because the people who are writing the ideas for advertising, a lot of the time, they've got no idea how people are actually encountering it, whether it's going to be on television or on Instagram or in a pre-roll on YouTube, all of which are very different environments for people to see stuff. And the more specific and targeted you can be to your audience when you're creating stuff, probably the better the connection is going to be.
Yeah, and interesting, just another way of saying that, but I always thought was interesting, was in the old days of the show reel, is that broadly speaking, people will have decided whether they want to talk to you, having watched probably the first 3 things on the show reel, maybe 4. And after that, you're just giving them an excuse to not talk to you, because in due course, the 6th thing is a bit of either indifferent or a stinker, and they go, yeah, maybe not. So that's to Bart's exact point about brevity, and you get to choose what you want to be judged on.
Yes.
You don't have to just put it all out there, and you take an editorial position.
And these days, no one's going to watch 3 things. They're going to watch one thing, half of one thing, and they'll probably drag and drop a few times while they're at it.
Oh dear, that was a very old school observation.
Well,
Thank you.
in those days, like when I started in you know, in the early 2000s, you know, if you wanted to show your work to somebody, you went in, you got a coffee, you sat down on a sofa, and you talked to them, and you put it on, and you press play. They sat there and they watched it. It was, you know, it was a fantastic way of watching things with people. But now you send somebody a link, and did they watch it? Did they not watch it? Who knows? You know,
for a better
yeah, you know,
They were different.
Summers were hotter, policemen were younger.
And Nina, if we can, from your point of view of, you know, having been an animation student, what advice would you give to today's animation students?
I would say work work with other people, like work on other people's projects, because you learn a lot from how other people maybe direct or how other people do it, but also you get better at things, like at your skills. So if I would be storyboarding for someone else, I would learn a lot from that. And I think that is, I did a bit of that, but also now people that are working with me, like interns for instance, I some when they're good and they have like you see really that they really want it. I mean, I still work with these people now, like you take them with you and that's how you develop your portfolio as well, but also just getting to know other people. So I think that's very important. Yeah.
Yeah, and it comes down at
I
the
always
end.
say to students, I say, just say yes. If anyone says, hey, do you want to come and shoot a music video with me on the weekend for no money? Say yes. Do you want to work on my short film and do some animation? Yes. Just say yes to everybody. And, obviously some of those experiences won't turn out as you'd hope. But truly, yeah, you're kind of just constantly meeting people and learning and kind of developing your interpersonal creative skills, which is what it's all about.
Great, and that's very sage advice to end on. And I'd just like to thank all of you for making time to impart your wisdom and tell us all about BlinkInk. So thank you very much, Nina. Thank you, Bart. Thank you, James. Thank you, Courtney. Great to hearing from you all, and look forward to seeing what's next for BlinkInk. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great, thanks for having us.
Bye.
Thanks.